Yeah, I think I'm actually a little disappointed, Luai, that you missed the opportunity to make a statement to a fellow Muslim here that it's extremely morally corrupt to find excuses for terrorism. That America wants to hear Muslims condemn American
respect for everyone.
Excuse me, you allowed this man to give a soliloquy that was extremely inappropriate while you interrupt people. I find that inappropriate. Who didn't? So these lack of specifics, I think, speaks to the the lack of moral courage, which is the fact that you have somebody that comes up and gives an excuse for terrorism, blaming it on foreign policy, and then identifies my ideas with whoever else he wants to link it to, whatever else conspiracy theory, but doesn't address the ideas. Doesn't address the topics that we're talking about, which is political Islam and its conveyor belt towards radicalism. And the fact that he wants to paint what I'm saying as being attacking all of Islam, which was the second part of his question. So the first part, my mother taught me, and my family, as all of you have learned, stealing is wrong no matter what your excuse. So terrorism, regardless of the victimization of certain populations that certainly needs to be addressed, cannot be explained. So the we condemn terrorism but crowd is extremely dangerous, because that gives teenagers, it gives radicals listening an excuse to someday do some other act of terror. The second part has to do with Islam. I believe in my faith. I'm doing this because I love my faith. You may get death threats from non-Muslims. Some of us get them from Muslims that we're more courageous enough to say that they are the enemies. Imam al-Laki started as a moderate imam in Northern Virginia, as I wrote in the Des Moines Register yesterday, because he condemned 9/11, sounded all great, but was talking about the Islamic State and slowly slid down some kind of radicalization pathway. And no Muslims, very few, have stood up and said, we want to create institutions to fight this, to figure out how it is that our faith has been corrupted by these radicals, because we want to fix the problem. It's a different Islam. It's not our Islam. But to say that Islam is one entity is just absurd. There is radical Islam out there that we need to make lists and fight and say we are Muslims against Al-Qaeda, Muslims against Awlaki, Muslims against Hamas, organizations that use terror as an action. That will make America love Muslims as much as they love their neighbor.
I partially concur, but one of the things that I want to debunk is this idea about moderate Muslims and extreme Muslims. Because within the United States, historically, Muslims have been American Muslims, and you don't judge your neighbor as a moderate Christian. Now, going back to the point about Islam being the fault, maybe some people won't like this, but Hitler and Mussolini were practicing Christians. Now, however they thought their Christianity was what it was, Hitler and Mussolini were both Christians. What they did in World War II was not a reflection of Christianity. So within Islam today, the fact, I've been to more than 90 countries. I just came from Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. They're building the largest university complex in the world, a new modern complex. And you know what is open for? Only women from Asia, Africa, and the Middle East that will be educated free in that university. I'm not talking about the largest women's university. After September 11th, the first country to send their condolences to the United States was Iran. Does anybody know that? The first country, before the president of France came and visited. The entire Islamic world condemned September 11th, not only the Islamic world, globally. It shocked the world. Now, there were political factors that changed afterwards, but whenever you say Islam is part of it, it's not Islam, it's the misinterpretation of Islam, just as Hitler and Mussolini misinterpreted Christianity. As far as the gentleman talking, and I will close, there is a fact that from the Congo to Egypt to many countries in the world, our United States government has unfortunately supported many repressive leaders and still supporting them. And this is a grievance within society. My last point is the most challenging factor that we have in the world today is 50% of the world's population is under the age of 25. And 50% of the world's population live on less than $2 a day, and 25% live on $1 a day. Now, if you want to know where the global challenge is, it's not from Islamic extremism. It is from Brazil to Jakarta to Bangladesh and globally, where we have 50% of the population. I've been saying this the last 40 years since I left the Peace Corps. If we do not educate and give opportunity and enlightenment and productivity to our global population, Islam will be a small fragment of this instability in our global societies. Thank you.
I'd like to address the question initially to Dr. Jasser, but I'd be happy to hear opinions from the other panelists as well. You touched on it a couple times throughout tonight, but how do you think that we can best separate the misconception of Islam as a monolithic entity from the reality of a multifaceted culture?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Is that what happens is that because we're a minority, it's almost as if, and I say this all the time, that we become a ping pong ball for partisan politics in America between, who's going to defend the minority group the best, who's going to keep America more secure, and meanwhile, you have a population of a diverse faith that includes, everybody from far left to the far right within the Muslim community. So what I think needs to happen is that clearly our message at the American Islamic Forum for Democracy is that the solution for political Islam comes from within Islam. It has to be a pious, moderate Islam that allows us to be... America was formed by pious Christians, but they didn't want anything to do with the Church of England. And I think similarly, there is definitely a movement within the Muslim community that wants to not be a part of the Iranian theocracy that people will give positive elements about, but most Muslims don't want to live under, or the Saudi monarchy and what they do to their community. So I think that ultimately we need to recognize that Muslims are, that spiritual Islam, pious, humble Islam is the answer to the problem of political Islam, and Muslims are as diverse as every faith community. Imagine any of you standing up and saying, who speaks for the Jewish community, and what's the Jewish community's opinion on X? Or what's the Christian community's opinion? Would we ask the Methodists, the Presbyterians, the Baptists, the Catholics? Who would we ask? Or any other faith community? It's really un-American to lump all of one faith into one idea. And I think similarly, Muslims in this country have a huge spread of what Islam means to them, how it applies to their family life, their governmental life, and to make it into one identity politic is extremely, actually it's what's prevented. And this is why the last 12 months have been the busiest year in arrests for terrorist incidents since 9/11. Because we're not treating the problem, we're not addressing the narrative that's leading to radicalization, which is identification of Muslim youth with this country as ours. And that we haven't done yet.
I think what you're hearing tonight is kind of a different point of views on the cause and the source and the reason why me and Dr. Jasser and most of the panels, we agree on something, that there are things that we need to work on within our Muslim community. There are some issues we are facing and we need to resolve. We believe in our faith that tells us through the Prophet Muhammad, you know what? God is not going to help you become better or change until you change from within. We believe that. We're Muslims. We absolutely believe that. Now, however, what you are presented now with two different views, and that's the beauty of having discussions like this. What Dr. Jasser is saying, we have the ideology, the idea or the thought or the teaching of the Islam is the thing that we need to modify, we need to change, and we need to adapt. And what I'm saying is, we don't need to change, we need to follow. If we follow the religion the way it should be followed, and we learn it the way it should be, it's supposed to be, and the way how it was taught, and it presented to us through the Quran, then we won't have any problems. No, and the second thing I want to say, we are absolutely, I stand here with everybody that's saying, we are against terrorism, we're against terrorists, we're against killing, we are supporter of all this. You know, the panelists who couldn't make it is a great example that of Muslims is standing against in the face of terrorism within the United States. He's a social worker that helped capture all these terrorism that's within their own community. You know, at the end of the day, I always say this. I might compromise a lot of things. I might look away from other things, but I will never look at anything that will hurt my kids. And we are not going to stand. And you know the beauty about Islam? Islam is telling me, you have to stand with the laws. You have to protect the innocent. You have to stand and follow the rules of the country you're living in. That's the religion. And that's why the view. Not change it, learn it. And when you learn it, you will find that that's the solution for it.
Just one clarification, that the Drake instructor or the professor who was talking before me, he was talking about the reasons of terrorism. He didn't say excuses for terrorism. And there's a great difference between reasons and excuses. The other thing is, this is my question to Dr. Jasser. I would like you, if you please, to list your credentials that makes you qualified to present Islam or Muslims or talk about that. Thank you so much.
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that, because in this country, all of us practice our faith and we feel that we have equal access to God. And if you can tell me that I need credentials to speak on behalf of my faith, please let me know what those are, because it's the imams, it's the people running our faith with the credentials from Al-Azhar and Saudi schools that have ruined it for the rest of us. So thank you. I'm proud of the fact that actually I'm not educated at Al-Azhar. My credentials are the fact that I love my faith, I've read my Quran, I pray 5 times a day, I'm raising my kids to be Muslim, and I'm as qualified as any other Muslim in this country to speak on what I believe and what I believe to be right or wrong. And I'm here to debate those issues. There's no right or wrong. And it's actually this type of elitism. Behind the question that you asked, it is elitism about the fact that only clerics, only ulama or ummas or mullahs can speak on behalf, or shuyukh, and actually in Arabic shuyukh is a respected person. Only they have the right to speak on behalf of Islam. It's no different than saying only physicians have a right to decide what medicine you take. And in this country, last I checked, I can't force medications down my patients' throats. So please don't let the clerics force their religion down our throat. And I want to address one other thing. When you give reasons for terrorism without making it clear that those are corrupt terrorist organizations and those are corrupt, you are basically telling America that that's an excuse, whether you're not saying it or not.
In Ames, Iowa.
Wait. One quick clarification. One quick regarding the Azhar and the Saudis. As I said, our Islamic Center is the oldest continuous. Starting in 1954, when Gamal Abdel Nasser had good relations with the United States, our first imam came from the Azhar to Cedar Rapids, and we've had imams in Cedar Rapids from the Azhar. Since that time, we have 2 imams in Cedar Rapids that are from Egypt. I would invite you to come and sit with Imam Ahmed. You would find him the most educated, outspoken against any type of violence. And this concept that the United States is being infiltrated by Saudi Arabia and Egypt, I completely reject it as an American Muslim that has been virtually every state, many mosques. Their agenda is not to destabilize. These are and I would invite you to come and visit our Cedar Rapids community and then visit the imams. They are not.
Why did Al-Azhar not sign the UN Declaration of Human
Rights? That was a great question about... Yeah, that was a great question about what kind of qualification you have to speak. I was just going to share with you what is the Muslim faith and our views on this. You know, even in that, the Islam gave us a solution for it and gave us an answer. You know, the Islam simply say, you know what? You are obligated as a man or woman to educate yourself about Islam. And the second thing is, you do not have the right to give advice, spread misinformation without having the knowledge about what you're saying. Because you do not have the right to deceive people. That is in Islam. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said in his hadith, you know, the biggest crime that a Muslim will be punished for is claiming that they understand and they are deceiving and spreading information falsely and speaking on behalf of the Quran, on behalf of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, falsely. It will be punished tremendously. That's what our teaching, and that's why. To prevent what I talked about, deceptive forces. That's why we're asking about credential. Not to see where school you went to, but to see, it's to protect the ones they don't know.
Okay.